AWS RDS MySQL Service Hands-On Demo Advanced. In this section, let's look at some of the advanced capabilities of the RDS service, the MySQL RDS service to be precise. So as part of this section, let's take a deeper look at the RDS console. We'll look at configuration, logging, monitoring. We'll also scale up by moving to a bigger instance. We'll also improve the availability by moving to a multi-AZ instance. We'll scale out by creating a read replica. We'll also take a snapshot of the database, and then we'll simulate failover. All right, let's do a live demo. Here I am back in the AWS RDS console. Let's go ahead and click on RDS. Click on instances. That's where we see all our instances. We have already created one instance that you saw. Let's also, at this point, look at the console a little bit more carefully. On the left-hand side, you have instances that will show you all the instances that you have. You also have reserved purchases. Don't forget, your RDS instance is really a compute instance, so you can actually reserve one. This is for better pricing. There's also snapshots. You can create a snapshot for the database. There's already a snapshot that has been created for the RDS instance. Security group. That's where all the security groups are. There are no security groups at this point. Parameter groups. This is where the different parameter groups can exist. There is a default parameter group. I've also created my own parameter group. I can delete the parameter group. Let me go ahead and delete the parameter group. And then I'll show you how we can create another parameter group. Options. This is where the default options are. Don't forget, options are ways by which you can add special features to your database. Subnet groups. Events. This is where all the events are logged. So we have different events for the different databases. These are the database identifiers that you see on the left-hand side in the first column. And the server that we created was MyDB server instance. You can see the various events that are being logged. You can also subscribe to those events. And then there are also notifications. Okay, so let's get back to the instances. Click on the instances. Here we have our instance. Let's go ahead and modify the instance for performance and scalability. So I'm going to go in and click on the instance, click on instance actions, click on modify. And at this point, I'm going to say that I would like to go from micro to small instance. And then I would like to go into a multi-AZ deployment model. I would like to go, let the storage be the same size, that's fine. I would also, yeah, that's about it. So those are the two changes that I would like to make. I'm going to a larger instance and I want to make it multi-AZ. At this point, I have the opportunity to click continue and go ahead and make the changes, but when I submit it, it's not really going to make the changes unless I say apply immediately. Otherwise, it's going to make the changes only during the maintenance window. Since I want the changes to be done right now, I'll go ahead and say apply immediately. Notice it says that you want to go to a small instance and a multi-AZ instance. So I'll go ahead, yes, modify DB instance. At this point, the changes should start taking place immediately. Notice now it says it's modifying the database. Let's see what happens to the database while this is happening. Go to the MySQL instance and try to read. I can still read. It's still connecting to the database and making the changes. Maybe a little bit slow, but it's still working. The way it modifies the database is it launches a new machine, installs the database, brings up the changes that needs to be done, copies the data from the other database, brings it up, and then the new database server is going to assume the IP of the old database server. So it'll be seamless. It's modifying. Go back and look at the application. It's still working fine. I'm going to wait until the database is ready and available. It is actually available at this particular point. It's just that it's modifying. I'm going to pause until the database is available with the new modifications. So finally the database is now available. And as you can see, it went from tiny to small. Let's go ahead and try to get some details. So click on Instance Actions, see Details. And now it says that we have a small 10 gigabyte storage, multi-AZ version available. Notice that the availability zone in which the database is in is 2A, US West 2A, and then the secondary zone is 2B. So if it fails over, it's going to go to 2B. Okay, so we have two instances running actually. There's the primary instance, which is the master, and then there's the slave standby that's actually running in 2B, but we don't really see it. We won't see it until there is a catastrophe because of which there may have to be a failover. In that case, it'll actually upgrade the slave standby and then make the standby the master. So it uses this master-slave technique in order for you to give the best availability. Okay, so at this particular point, I would like to create a read replica. Click on Instance Details and create read replica. Now I have the opportunity to change the DB instance class and the storage type in this case. It's probably a good idea to keep it the same thing as the primary database. You can surely make this bigger or smaller, but usually it's a good idea to keep the same thing because you want a similar performance. And in this particular case, it's asking me for the DB instance identifier for the read replica. I'm going to say my DB server instance RR1, which is read replica 1. It also asks me where I want it. It's in the US West Oregon region. Availability zone, do I want it in the 2A or the 2B or the 2Z or the 2C? I'm just going to say give it to me in 2A and say create replica. Now when you create a replica, it is going to create a brand new instance. In fact, a complete copy of the master. Connect the slave to the master using asynchronous replication, and then any updates to the master will go to the slave. So let's wait for the slave read replica to come up. I'm going to pause until the read replica comes up. As you can see, the read replica is in the process. The master is completely available. The read replica is being created. You can see that there are two instances now. There's the master and there's the read replica 1. Let's wait for the read replica 1 to complete. Okay, so the read replica is now available. Let's click on the read replica and get the instance details. And we have a new endpoint for the read replica. My DNS server instance RR1. I'm going to copy that endpoint and I'm going to connect to that endpoint. And then I'm going to create a new connection. This is the read replica 1 and it's going to be this host name. The password is root. Test the connection. And now connected to the read replica slave. Hit OK. Now I'm going to connect to the master. Connected to the master. Go back home. Connect to the slave. Connected to the slave. So I have the master and the slave. If I go to the master and look at the tables, you'll notice that I have the tables right here. I can say select rows. Should have 2 rows. And if I go to the read replica, and if I go click on Acme DB, it's fetching the tables. This is the first time it's connecting to the database. And there should be a table called the item table. Right mouse click, select rows, and I should see all the rows right there. And I want to prove to you that the master-slave relationship exists. What I'm going to do is prove to you that when I make the change in the master, it'll be reflected in the slave. So let's go to the master, insert a record. This time I'm going to insert IT102, and it's going to be an X. It's from Hardware Special Incorporated, and the X cost price is $18.78. The selling price is $29.99, and there's 50 of them in the stock. Let's execute that. Insert statement in the master. We did that. Now let's go to the slave and let's ask it to select all the rows, and we have the third record created. Oh, I misspelled X to A's, but that doesn't matter. As you can see, the connection between the master and the slave exists. Okay. So as you can see in the RDS instances, we have two database instances, one master, one slave read replica. If we get the instance details for the master, it's in US West 2A availability zone right now. 2B is the secondary zone. And if you look at the slave, let's go back and look at the slave read replica instance. If you get its information, that's the other way to get it. It's also in 2A. Right. It's not a multi-easy. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is simulate a failover. I'm in 2A and I want to failover to 2B. This is how you can simulate failover in your application. So the way you do that is you go into the master and then you say reboot. This time you say reboot with failover. That's going to fail us over to 2B. Reboot. Okay, so the master is rebooting. Well, when you're rebooting the master, what's happening is that it failed over to 2B, and 2A is being rebooted at this particular point. So okay, so now let's prove that the failover has taken place successfully. Click on instance details, and you'll notice that the primary network or the availability zone is US West 2B, and the secondary availability zone is 2A. So we have simulated a failover at this particular point. Finally, I want to show you parameter groups and option groups. If you click on parameter groups, it shows you all the parameter groups that we have. We have the default parameter group. That's the default list of parameters. Notice you cannot really edit it. What you can do is you can say create a parameter group. Then you can say my parameter group. I'm going to just copy that, and then you can create it, and then you can go to the parameter group and say edit parameter groups, parameters, and now you're actually looking at all the parameters. There are hundreds of parameters. To be precise, there are about 288 parameters. If you want, you can make any changes you want to make for the database. Don't forget, parameter groups are database parameters. In this case, we don't have any changes, so we'll say cancel editing. Let's go back to the parameter groups. You can have as many parameter groups you want. You can also apply these parameter groups for the different database instances. For example, you can go to a database instance and say, I want to apply this parameter group. Or when you create a brand new database instance, you can go ahead and use one of the parameter groups that you created. Same thing for option groups. There is a default option groups. If you want, you can go ahead and clone the option group, create a group. You can call it my option group. Option group are extra features that you want to bring into a database. Okay, it needs description, also needs to know what engine. It's a little bit more picky. Create. Okay, so I created my own option group, and then I can go ahead and add an option. So for example, in MySQL, there's only one option called the memcached that allows you to get memcached for your database. I'm going to cancel that. But the point I'm making is that option groups are also available, and you can assign an option group, associate an option group with a database instance. Let's go ahead and take a look at logging. I'm going to pick an instance. I'm going to pick logs. You can see all the logs that are there. These are all the different log files that you can download. You can even watch the log files. If you want to view the MySQL error log, welcome to view it. You can add watches to it. You can download it. So that's where the log files go. Let's go back and let's look at monitoring. You can also say show monitoring, show multi-view monitoring. Here's all the activities that are happening in the database. That's the master database, CPU utilization, the number of connections that are coming in, read operations, write operations, storage, all kinds of monitoring information is available for you. Okay, now what I would like to show you snapshots. Let's go ahead and click on snapshots. There's already snapshots that are created because I was trying to reboot the instance and things like that. So it was creating some snapshot, but I can go ahead and create my own snapshot. Create snapshot. I would like to create a snapshot of the database, my DB server instance, my SS1, create, and that would create the snapshot. There it is. The snapshot is being created. And then I can recover the database to that instance in time. After going through this entire RDS console, you almost want to wonder, what is the role of a DBA anymore? Is it really point and click, or do they even have to execute any commands? All right, so that's all I have for you in terms of architectural capabilities. Let's go ahead and get back to the slides. So in this section, we took a deeper look at the RDS console. We looked at configuration in terms of parameter groups and option groups and how we were able to create those groups. And the way you create it is by cloning existing parameter and option groups, making the changes, saving it, and then applying it to a database instance. We also looked at logging, where the different MySQL logs are placed. We looked at monitoring, all the different monitoring watches that are being shown. We also looked at scaling up our database instance by moving to a bigger instance. We improved the availability by moving to a multi-AZ instance. We also scaled out our database by creating a read replica. In fact, we improved the scalability and the availability of our application so that our clients can talk to both the master and the slave. In our case, the way I demonstrated that is by using MySQL Workbench. We also took a snapshot of our database and simulated a failover. And the way you simulate a failover is by doing a reboot, and during the reboot there's an option there that says whether you want to simulate a failover by switching the availability zone, which is what we wanted. This technique gets used quite often by application developers and testers to ensure that the application is working properly even during the times of crisis, when the database crashes in real life.